Peace and healing, family. Welcome to Spiritual High Podcast. I am Empress Crissy, and today we have episode number 4 with Miss Desiree, and she's going to tell us a little bit about herself. Hi, Desiree. Welcome to the show.
Hi, how are you?
I'm great.
Hi, my name is Desiree. I go by Phoenix. Some people know me by The Phoenix Has Risen. I own my own podcast too, and I'm currently working on my book. And I'm just here to share my knowledge about spiritual hygiene and how important it is to practice spiritual hygiene as a spiritualist. So thank you for having me.
You're welcome, and thank you for coming, Desiree. I know we had a couple of hour conversation last week. You had a lot of great information related to spiritual hygiene, and I had never really heard it like that before, called that before. So let's kind of give us a little bit of foundation of just spiritual hygiene, how important it is, and exactly what it is.
Spiritual hygiene, I would say, is like your basic needs. Like basically when you leave the house, you have to put deodorant on when you leave the house. So I look at spiritual hygiene as the basic need of just keeping your foundation, like your aura, everything protected so that you're able to walk through today's day and just be protected mentally, physically, emotionally. Spiritual hygiene is what keeps the boat floating in the water. And without it, you're just out here unprotected. A lot of people don't think about spiritual hygiene, but I feel like spiritual hygiene is so important because it just helps you stay protected in this realm. People normally don't think like that because we don't have that knowledge. And I wish I had that knowledge when I was younger, and I definitely would have avoided a lot of things. So spiritual hygiene basically could just be smudging, lighting the incense, praying over yourself. Some people use the Bible, the book of Psalms is protection spells. Spiritual hygiene has so many different components where it's so much where I could just put it all in just one little ball, basically emotionally, saying your affirmations, protecting yourself, like using Florida water, or just spiritually, you could be calling your ancestors to protect you. Spiritual hygiene, cutting off people who are negative, surrounding yourself with people who have positive intentions. Spiritual hygiene can mean like being celibate, protecting yourself in a sexual way too, because people don't understand that sex brings energy in. Energy is the biggest interaction that we deal with on a day-to-day basis. When we go on the market, you're trading energy with random strangers. So protecting your energy is the biggest thing. So spiritual hygiene is the practice of staying clean in this dirty world. Spiritually, you deal with spiritual attacks daily. You don't even know what's happening, and that's how spiritual hygiene can help you. Like this interaction that we're doing right now is a spiritual exchange because we're exchanging words, we're exchanging knowledge. So spiritual hygiene is that wall of defense that protects you from the outside attacks. So I feel like in a way, a lot of people need to be educated on this because they don't know what they're doing. It's a lot of people who are just waking up to their spiritual journey. They don't know where to go. They're looking on YouTube or they're trying to find on Facebook, like, hey, what do I do? And I feel like the biggest way to start your spiritual journey is to understand what spiritual hygiene is and how you can keep your spiritual hygiene up. It's like your biggest wall of defense. Definitely. So definitely during the pandemic, I feel like spiritual hygiene was a must for me.
Yes. Let's go back to your spiritual journey. Because you gained that knowledge of course, through the actual, being on a spiritual path. So what got you on the spiritual path? Because you kind of young, younger than I was when I got on my path. So give us a little bit about that, about your spiritual awakening.
My grandma passed away in 2019. So during that process of grieving my grandmother, I noticed that I was having like spiritual experiences of like feeling like I could feel her around me, or I was seeing like numbers back to back, the 111s, the 222s, and I'm like, what is going on with me? Like I felt like I was physically separating myself from everyone. It felt like my whole world was falling apart. What I know now is a tower moment. So I pretty much had to kind of guide myself a little through that energy, because I really didn't understand what was going on. But it's like my body, my soul knew what was going on. So I pretty much knew that something was happening, but I didn't really understand what was going on. And everybody knows in 2019, that was like that wave before COVID kind of came in. So I remember I went on Twitter and I approached a woman. I was telling her about my experiences because I didn't know who to talk to. Mm-hmm. Like everybody's looking at you like, girl, you just going through grief. So she was explaining to me like what was going on. She connected me to my grandma, and that's when I knew. I'm like, okay, this stuff is real. I always felt connected to the spiritual realm when I was younger, but it showed me like, hey, this is real. Like, and I slowly started to learn the tools, like on how to connect with people, and I did bump my head along the way because, I mean, so it took a while to understand the need of spiritual hygiene, why you don't just go to everybody for readings, why it's important to wrap your head up when you're doing readings, why you should be careful on who you go to and protect your whole energy, because a lot of people sometimes will tell you certain things to throw you off your path. Learning that everybody who says they're spiritual doesn't mean that you go to them for help. Like, so I definitely felt like being young, I didn't expect myself to jump into that, but now that I see what happened, it was a reason it needed to happen the way it happened. Like, everybody wakes up at a different time in their life. Some people wake up when they're older. Some people had that experience when they're younger, but I'm noticing the newer generation, they're coming in a lot younger. Like, these souls are way more advanced. They're jumping into it and they know a lot.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, because I was 40 and my son is 10. He pretty connected still to his spiritual, because when you're young and when you first born, you still on that side. And so because I had him at an older age and I was kind of spiritual after I had him, I'm keeping him knowledgeable of that. So you're right. The kids these days are very much connected to that part still. And when I look online, I see a lot of, especially guys, they're in their 20s, and they very highly spiritual. And I'm happy to see that, because the older you get, it's kind of harder, because I spent so many years not connected. So that's why I was happy to speak with you and talk to you, because you're very, very, very wise, and I know that you tapped in to your spiritual side. And because I want my audience to be the people that's new, that need the help, to coming in, because the spiritual hygiene and protection is very, very vital once you start on your spiritual path, because you're always under spiritual warfare. And that's why I thought that this information was very, very much needed to be out at this time. You spoke about we can do the sage, doing the sage.
Mm-hmm.
We can use crystals, spiritual baths, and we can also protect ourselves as far as our mates. We
Solvency.
yeah. So how else? Well, what else can we put in with the spiritual hygiene?
So definitely when it comes to spiritual hygiene, I feel like a lot of people have to understand this. This is something that really helped me at first, because when I first came in, I thought that I had to be love and light all the time. Mm-hmm. And if I wasn't love and light all the time, I wasn't doing something right. But we have to understand that we're not always going to be love and light all the time, and to love ourselves when we feel that darkness, and realize that duality is what runs this universe. So it's a natural balance of the things. So when I would down myself, because I'm like, I'm not loving light right now, so I must not be healing properly, because I'm not. And I realized, I'm like, no, you have to love yourself through that darkness. It's okay to feel some days like, I don't know, I don't feel like it, I don't feel like being bothered right now. Love yourself through those moments, because that's where you really get to know yourself. That's right. Where I really got to know myself. So that's how I'm able to tell, like, hey, I could tell you this because I went through this myself. It didn't matter how many crystals I bought. It didn't matter how much sage I lit or whatever. I still felt that. And I'm like, what is wrong? And I had to go through. Yeah. So I definitely say love yourself during those dark moon phases. Definitely find what works for you, but also realize that even crystals have duality, where you could use crystals for either to bring you up, or you could use crystals to actually bring something down. So everything in this earth that is natural of this earth is duality. So even if you're not happy at the moment, just know it's gonna come. Like, don't be too hard on yourself. Feel those emotions, because emotions are to feel. That's why they call it emotions, because it moves through you. Let it feel those emotions, and then transmute it into something where you could use it, like as a podcast or a song or poetry. That's why I write poetry, because in moments of when I don't feel, my best, it comes out in my poetry, and then it could help somebody else. So. Right. That's a way of also, and I would say, practicing spiritual hygiene, where it's like you're being kind to yourself, even in those moments where you don't feel yourself, or you don't feel like you're on top of the world. And I had days where I'm like, I don't even feel like doing my hair, but I'm like, you know what? Let me transmute this energy and turn it into a positive where it can help me in the long run. Because I'm not gonna lie, it's scary sometimes when you don't know where you're going. We all had those moon phases.
We all had those challenging times. For me too, excuse me. When I first started, I was like you. I was want to be love and light, but I wasn't feeling love and light. And so I had to learn that it's a whole spectrum. We are light and we are dark, and I had to learn some of the dark parts of it to be able to integrate them both together. Because it's not. And another thing too, the spiritual hygiene, you have to know how to protect yourself.
Oh yeah.
Because everybody don't have good intentions, so you have to learn how to maneuver in this dimension, as well as as above so below. So I have to learn that everything ain't gonna be all good and nice. You gotta learn you gotta get your defense up all the way around. So that is definitely a part of the hygiene. I learned that just by experience, just by experiencing too. I didn't want to learn the dark part. I'm of living light. But the more I grew spiritual, it's like, no, you gotta learn everything, because everything is spiritual. So
everything is spiritual.
Everything is spiritual. And negative energy can be draining, and we have to know how to shield ourselves and to maintain, those barriers. So what are some other ways? I know I learned how to when you want to go out of something, you can shield yourself to
Yes.
go out. Because I know a lot of times too, when we become spiritual, we become like hermits. You don't want to go out. We so sensitive to energy. So for those people who are in that space where they are so sensitive to energy and they got to go out, give us 2 ways we can shield ourselves before we even leave home.
So cover yourself with I use the book of Psalms, and you could choose whatever works for you. My favorite is I love Psalms 23, but I also feel like whatever works for you, because I know people have different ones that they use. I say shields up, cloak, and I set that intention on cloaking my car. I also, before I leave, I put Florida water in my shoes. I also say the Psalms over my shoes, because it's like you set the ground that you walk on, meaning you bless the ground you walk on. Because there are some people who do magic things, and you might step over something, and it's just basically protecting the ground you walk on. Because some people try to cross you, and basically that's setting the ground you walk on, where you're like, listen, when I walk on this ground, and I'm saying this Psalms 23, I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I shall fear no, because I'm walking through that valley of the shadow of death can mean change, rebirth. Death is like a beautiful thing. You're setting that energy like, hey, I'm calling in my angels. I'm calling in my ancestors. I'm calling in my people to walk with me.
Right.
And you gotta have that power of like, ain't nobody messing with me. Also, to the people of color, I had that high John on me. Like, I have certain trinket, like certain whatever works for you, but don't just, if you're new to certain stuff, walk in it. And it's okay to be a student, because right now I'm still a student around certain things. So I'm not going to say, oh, I'm an expert, and everybody's here to learn. But
that's right.
It's not bad to ask questions, because but it's so many things you could do. Like I love carrying crystals too. I definitely love that too. I love carrying protection amulets, whatever you feel is comfortable. I know there's more stuff than sage that I use. Dragon's blood is really my go-to. That's my number one.
Yeah.
I just got into frankincense. I like my camera for. It depends on you. Because I feel like sage more so. I like sage. I used to light it up more. It kind of invites spirits in a little bit more than kind of, because they like the smell of it. It kind of brings them in, and because it's like I'm like more of an open channel, I try to like get something that kind of like mellows the energy up a little bit. Because if I don't, I'm gonna just be up all night like, oh my god, I can't sleep. Like,
yeah.
So definitely, it's so many things you could do, but I feel like those are my things that I do definitely before I walk out. If you don't have Florida water, you could always use like regular water, because water is one of the oldest, is our ancestors basically. So,
you gave some very good ones. I hadn't heard of putting the Florida water in my shoe. That's a good one.
Oh yeah.
I used to have a bra full of I used to put mine in my bra. I used to have a bra and pocket full of black amethyst and I mean black onyx and everything. But
black onyx is my favorite. That one too.
I used to do the crystals. I would do the crystals and I would do the shield before I, but you definitely gave us some good ones to take note of. Very, and the Psalm 23, that's my favorite one too. I like the Psalm 23. Most definitely. And you're right. The bottom of your shoe pick up all kind of spirits, like the liquor store, the clubs, and stuff like that. All kind of spirits can attach themselves.
Even in your house, when you walk in bare feet, too, you pick up on energies. That's why they say put your shoes on when you don't walk barefoot over at somebody else's house. You're going to pick up on spirits or they spirit. Right. Depending on, the energy. But, that's an old saying I used to hear as a little.
So we talked the other day, you spoke about, was it voodoo or voodoo? Which?
Hoodoo.
Hoodoo. Okay, hoodoo. Yeah. There was different types of spiritual outlets and spiritual avenues, and you the hoodoo.
Yes.
Okay. Good stuff. So what else you discussed a lot with the spiritual hygiene. I'm trying to think of what else would fit. I know if you to the stage where you're doing your rituals or your spells, definitely you have to have your hygiene up with that.
Oh yes.
Yes.
I would say always do it. No, trust your body. Your body is like your compass and your guide to guide you on what days you should do something or if you shouldn't do anything. It's important to practice divination before you do anything spiritually, whatever ritual, whatever. The biggest thing is never tell anyone what spirits walk with you. That's spiritual hygiene for one. Do not tell people what spirits walk with you. But also remember this. Spirits also have enemies as well. Shout out to R.S. Cole for that knowledge because she had, taught me that about how important it is. Do not let people know spirits walk with you. And you see that a lot on talk, or people be like, I'm the daughter of this and I'm the son of that. And I'm like, because it's a reason why you don't do that. People don't think people are going to, come after them. But until you actually have it happen to you, you're like, oh my God. And it will be your closest friends, people you think love you and care about you, that will try to cross you. But it's important to have some type of privacy. I say privacy is the biggest part of spiritual hygiene because it's spiritual. Let's call it spiritual privacy. It's okay. Everything doesn't have to be shared with the internet. Don't share your altars on the internet. Don't take pictures of who you're working with. It's between you and that spirit that you're working with.
Right.
Always protect your privacy. What you're doing, everybody don't need to know. Also, making sure that whatever you do is justified. Don't just because you're being petty or you don't like the person, let me go put them in a jar. No, you have to, everything that you do is going to come back to you in a way of I don't like saying the word karma in a way because I know karma was used against our people to hold them down and be like, you better not, attack us because we took over your land, and if you do that, you're gonna get karma. Karma, I feel like, is a word that was really used to pin us down so we don't retaliate, as our ancestors were told that. But we realize that karma is necessarily the energy of just the white Christians. They were afraid of our magic because our magic goes in very deeply, very deeply. And I feel like more people are waking up. I'm very excited to see the newer generation come in and lead and bring and restore what was naturally ours anyway. Everything is returning back to the natural way of Earth. Mother Gaia is definitely bringing her people back to where they need to be. So I feel like nature is definitely where you will get reconnected into this. But a way that you could practice spiritual hygiene is by privacy. creating that privacy, connecting with the people that you need to stay connected with, staying away from people who bring you down, or being in rooms that don't really serve you. A lot of people don't know how to walk away from things that no longer serve them. So that's a part of spiritual hygiene, because people do not know how to let go of things that will drag them deeply. Also, like letting go of friendships or whatever that you had for years. Like there's such thing as energy vampires. A lot of people don't understand that energy vampires are around a lot, and sometimes your family members could be energy vampires as well. Learn when to say no, but also good spiritual hygiene is just basically having common sense. Does it make sense? Mm-hmm. If it don't, then you don't need to be around it. So I definitely feel like that's a way that you can kind of begin walking into this. I know some people just don't use their common sense sometimes, and they get themselves into things, but the spiritual, even the whole spiritual journey, it's about just respecting, the just getting to a certain level where you're comfortable with certain knowledge, because all knowledge everybody ain't ready for. And I noticed, like, even the elders, they're not ready to pass certain things down to you. It's not because they feel like, oh, I don't want you to have this knowledge. It's because sometimes we're not ready for certain things yet that we feel like we are. And I know there's certain things that I'm probably not ready yet.
Right.
No. And I respect that. But also I feel like just trust your instinct. And for the people who are just waking up to their spiritual gifts, a way that you could like practice discernment and protect yourself is don't just go to multiple readers and try to get information. Try to tap into it by yourself and really get to feel yourself, because your heart really guides you to where you need to be. So when I would doubt my instinct, I would be like, I knew that, so why? I didn't need somebody else telling me that. So why did I even waste my time? So you just gotta trust your word. Like whatever your gifts are, just trust that gut feeling. I don't know. Everybody has different clairs. It depends on which you feel comfortable with. But that big thing I say to people is not only just be careful on who you let read you. Protection and cleansing each month is how you have, you keep that hygiene up. Like, when your cycle's on, you're a female, you clean up after, you put your pad on. Like, it's a process. Like, you don't just go in there like, hey, a random person just read me. Like, no. Everybody, there are spiritual ops out here. Like, I like to call it spiritual ops. People.
That's a big one. That one right there. That's the number one thing that you're talking about right now. Especially when you are new, you don't know all your gifts, right? Really, you getting readings, and that person is like high. They know they'll take your stuff from you.
Yep, and they
will take it. So if you knew, it's best that you just get you a deck of cards or something.
They will purposely throw you off. They'll purposely try to throw you off.
Yep.
And tell you some bull crap to throw you off of your path. I mean, I had it done, like where I was a week, and I'm like, this don't sound right. And sometimes your people will let you know, like, don't listen to that. But also, I understand how it feels to be new to something. You're just like, I don't know which way to go. And you have like a lot of smiling people like, here, come here, I'll guide you. Realize that every smiling face isn't a person that's going to help you. That wicked witch in Snow White was a smiling face at first. And, don't bite that apple. Like every apple isn't going to help you. But there are people who are kind enough and will guide you and bring you in. And it's important to fill out the room, because you'll meet different people throughout this journey who are a part of your soul tribe, who are real soul tribe members of you. And then you'll meet some people who possibly could have been past life connections where they were kind of enemies in the past life.
Mm-hmm.
You'll notice it, like, definitely with, I notice love readings cause an issue too, a lot of times in the spiritual community that could cause issues with people. And I'm just saying, if it don't resonate, don't pay it any mind, because sometimes you can manifest things into your existence when you're overthinking. So I feel like for my advice for the newcomers is fill out the energy, but focus on you. Like, that's how spiritual hygiene, that's the biggest thing. Focus on, keep your eye on your spiritual journey. Don't look at Lisa's spiritual journey. Don't believe she knows how to do this and she floating over there. Don't worry about that. That's for her. That's not for you. So when you're worried about somebody else's journey, you can't focus on yours because you over there worried about why you can't do what she do. You need to worry about what you need to do for yourself. So a lot of times is don't get blinded by that evil eye of competition. Sometimes people look at you like, oh, I don't have this type of knowledge, so maybe I'm not doing something right. How does she have this? Like, no, focus on yourself. So spiritual hygiene also protects you from that weird evil eye, because there are people who will randomly not like you for what they feel like they lack, but they don't lack anything because they have everything that they need if they would just look at what they have and not worry about what you have in front of you. So it's like important. That's why when I feel like I'm swaying, I always try to keep my mind, be like, all right, focus on that. All right. Because sometimes you get backtracked because you're like, wait a minute, am I not doing something? Like, no. Everything that you have or have been through or whatever knowledge you had, is the purpose of it is to just keep staying on your path. Like, that's how a lot of people get lost when they're coming in, because they're like, well, I'm not able to see ghosts. So is there something wrong with me? No, that's just probably not your gift. Maybe you have something else. So I definitely feel like that's one thing that newcomers, they get lost with when they first come in. And then also, like with spiritual hygiene, they don't tell you about that. When you first come in, everybody's just worried about picking up a box of cards. They're not even thinking they don't even know what divination is. I'm like, wait a minute. When I first came in, my advice is to educate yourself on what you're doing, so that way you are protected in other forms of, like, what you're doing. Don't just pick up a thing of cards and you don't know how to cleanse your area. You don't like, so it's so much stuff that I feel like when I first came in, I wish somebody would have been like, hey, don't do that. But it's like, now that we have more people who are awakened, I'm hoping that, they can kind of guide the people who are coming in and be like, hey, before you do that.
That's right.
Don't pick up that pendulum without understanding how to cleanse, or talking about the portals or the different entities, the different, like, people are not educated on what they're dealing with. So when they see something, they get shook, like off of the shrooms. I'm like, oh my God, people need to understand. Give me 1 sec. I need some water.
Yeah, go ahead and get you some water. You right, because even with me, when I first got started, it was like, you heard about like Oshun, the Orishas, do this with this particular spirit, and it's like,
no,
you need to pick up. You need to go back to the basics. Very, very basics. And see, for me, I'm so practical. So when I first started, I didn't move forward with nothing until I was comfortable. I understood it. I followed my gut. And the first thing I did was got my ancestor altar. And to be honest, I was afraid of that too. But when I studied, that's how I found Andrew Ali's group. When I studied, and I felt comfortable, I did that first. So that's why now I decided to come out, and because people are waking up, to help new people. When you start out, you just can't dive in. Come to your basic, get your basic information because it's high level.
It definitely is.
And once you open up portals and stuff up, they open. So you have to be very mindful of that, especially when you're new and when you're starting out, to learn how to protect yourself, learn your hygiene, do your spiritual baths, the basic. Just put salt in the corners of your house, put salt around your house, just basic little things that you can do to protect yourself that don't take a lot of money or a lot of know-how. But learning the basics to spiritual hygiene is definitely important. And that's why we are here today doing this podcast episode. And Desiree has given us a lot of information that we can definitely use. I've learned something that I didn't, like I said, the Florida water in your shoes. I'm like, that's brilliant. We got different levels. I don't know everything. I haven't heard everything, So and that's why too, I decided to collab with other spiritualists to interact, collab. I can still learn as I teach. I'm still a student. And so that's what we have today on the on spiritual hygiene. And we will have a series of the spiritual basics. We spoke about spiritual divination. We can go over that too, because there's so many different ways spiritual, tools of divination. And also too, I want to go over spiritual practices can be one of our series, because you have to build a solid spiritual practice, whether it's sun gazing, whether it's meditation, whether it's yoga, whatever. So we will be coming back with other parts to build upon the spiritual hygiene. But for today's episode with the spiritual hygiene, I got one good takeaway. But Desiree, can you give us one key takeaway for the listeners for this episode for the spiritual hygiene?
Think of spiritual hygiene as is the force field of everything. So that is the foundation of everything. Protecting yourself in all aspects. Just think of it as it's protecting like a big shield. So having that established and understanding the basics of that, that's how you can do anything in this spiritual journey. No matter what your calling is, whatever you choose to practice, that's your outer force. So without that, you'll be out here basically catching spiritual attacks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And Desiree, you have a podcast on Spotify, right?
Yes.
Tell us about that. And where else can we find you at?
So my podcast on Spotify, I actually have two. My original one was Love on Yourself podcast. That was my first one. That was my baby that I made in 2020. And it did pretty well, but I ended it after 13 seasons because it was time for something new. Mm-hmm. So my new podcast is called The Zone on Spotify, and it pretty much is like a fun twist to the spiritual side. And I basically say this is where the spiritual meets the physical realm, where we talk about topics that intertwine to, basically what I'm talking about today. I also bring guests on there and we talk about different mediums or whatever. And we just have discussions on topics of love, or depending on who's the guest, you never know. Mm-hmm. And I also have a page on Facebook. It's called The Zone on Facebook. And that's where I kind of share some of my TikToks. I was in hermit mode, so I'm kind of coming back and rebranding. So on TikTok, I am called The Phoenix Has Risen, and that is a lot of people call me Phoenix. That name came from after I was in hermit mode last year for a long time, and I pride myself on basically calling myself The Phoenix Has Risen, because a lot of my story comes from coming back from being hit during a hard time and coming back and being like the voice. And my friend actually made a joke about it, like, it's like, you're the voice, you're the voice, like. So I was like, I call myself the voice, like the Phoenix has risen. So it stuck with me. So I'm really excited to come back out of hermit mode and just share everything that I've been taking in. So
I'm glad that you decided to come back too, because you're needed. And I thank you for coming and helping me today on this episode. I told you that last week, you know, we all are needed at this time to help people who are willing to wake up, come out. I myself too, being hermit mode, we go in and out of it, right? Because the healing is ongoing. So, but I'm like, at this point, I got to come out to at least do my part, to help where I can, and whoever has the ear to hear my voice. So that's where I am today. And I do appreciate you for, like I said, for coming out. And
I'm glad.
Yep. And we'll continue to work together. If you need me to come on and talk, I can run my mouth too about a lot of different stuff here and there, whatever. Life stuff, spiritual stuff, anything. I like running my mouth a little bit these days. So I'm definitely open to that. And like I said, we'll have other episodes or series to this series that we'll do here on my podcast. And again, I thank you for this episode 4 of the Spiritual High Podcast with me, Empress Crissy. And thank you guys for tuning in. And if you're not subscribed, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, be notified, all that good stuff, to when we have some uploads, downloads, and all kind of loads. But I appreciate you guys and have a great day. Peace.
All right.
Thank you for tuning in to Spiritual High Podcast. I hope to see you in the next episode. Peace.